Very joyous sights there of the children. Just to follow up on that particular story, to help us appreciate all these happenings and the significance of the safety of immunization, we are now privileged to host Dr. Daniel Tumwine from the Uganda Pediatric Association. Doctor, many thanks for making time to speak to us.
Thank you.
Let's just maybe follow up from what the health minister is saying. The Act of 2017, doesn't this defeat one's rights, if at all, if they do not push their child to get immunized? Well, they do have rights too. And as a legal guardian, isn't this maybe sitting on the fence?
Yeah, I think the reason why we have this immunization drive is really to benefit the community. So, for example, for measles to be kicked out of a community, we need at least 95% of the whole community being immune. And for whatever reason, we have people who are very hesitant against using vaccines.
Yeah.
There are very many reasons why. But sometimes it is important to have the community be more protected, because there are vulnerable children who tend to be more who tend to be very vulnerable if some people don't do.
I hear you there, doctor. But the question is, if at all I am a legal guardian and this is my child, why would I risk to be jailed if it is a choice that I am actually making? Could you just walk us through that?
So, for example, well, I can give you another example. There are very many communicable diseases. So, for example, if you have Ebola and you refuse to take your person to a place which is safe, you're putting the community at risk. So the community also has people who are very vulnerable to measles, to rubella, and sometimes you find that people don't want to immunize for very many reasons. So the law was actually brought in because of that, to make sure that the whole community is safe, irrespective of what other parents actually think.
Right, let's move on to something else. There's a herd effect. This is HERD for our viewers out there, which technically is if there is a number of people who are actually immunized, the unimmunized ones, for lack of a better word, could actually benefit from this, should I call it, congregation. Just give me a sense of where we are on this, how applicable it is, or is Uganda very, very far removed?
No. So this is one of the reasons why we need mass immunization. We need, irrespective of whether you have been immunized before, the herd community is basically the concept of the whole community protects you from a certain disease. Right. So, for example, if there's a virus that is circulating, if as I said, 95% of all the people in that community actually are immunized, the 5% who are not immunized, because there are people who shouldn't be immunized. For example, if you have cancer, if you are very ill, like if you have AIDS, and very, very young people who are very vulnerable to disease, if those ones are not immunized, then the whole community is able to protect them, and therefore the virus does stop circulating in the community. So herd immunity is a very important concept as well.
One thing that's actually striking, going through the figures, is sort of a cyclical movement, not to sound like an economist here, but UK, Ireland, Netherlands, they suffered from measles outbreaks, right, in 2000s. Move on to the US, across the Atlantic, Pacific, was seeing almost the same thing, 1,000 measles cases between 2013 and 2015. Is this a cyclical movement that's recurring?
No, not really. It's actually social media which is driving anti-vaccination. So there's a lot of people who are going around. There's an anti-vaccination movement where people think that vaccines tend to be contaminated, they tend to cause harm to children, and that is not true. And actually what we've noticed more and more is that as more people go on social media and they go to these sites of conspiracy. In fact, Facebook and YouTube is trying to ban such sites because they are causing...
But Doctor, allow me to just stop you there, because in the 60s and the 50s, when the first anti-vaccination movements were coming out, there was no social media then.
Correct.
Yeah, so this cannot definitely be social media primarily driving this particular drive.
No, it is. Social media, mostly in Europe. In Uganda, it's mostly because of previously there was the issue of what people called the fake hepatitis B vaccine. But actually, it was found that hepatitis B vaccine was not fake. It was actually genuine. What was actually fake was the packaging. And when we did tests abroad, that hepatitis B was found to be very genuine. And because of that, many parents get very scared and say, you know what, if last time this vaccine was found to not be true, you know, what happens this time, but actually it's putting the correct message out there. How do we make sure that we are dealing with evidence? You know, I've immunized my own child today. You saw the minister immunizing their own children. We are not fools. Even us, we have children.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Doctor, very briefly before I let you go, one thing you've mentioned social media. One man who's keen on social media is the U.S. President Donald Trump, who once suggested that autism could actually be a sort of a side effect of vaccination. To what extent are you fighting against this political agenda? Don't get me started on Pakistan and Abbottabad. To what extent is this actually going counter the other way to whatever you actually drive?
It is, as I said, yeah. So there's that driver where people think that actually measles causes autism. Measles does not cause autism. There are thousands and thousands of evidences, of papers, scientific evidence, which shows that actually measles doesn't cause autism. Of course, it came out, people associate measles with autism because usually if I have autism, it tends to come out at the same time when I immunize my children. For example, the first signs of autism are if you can't speak properly, you're not speaking properly, you have behavior change, and that usually comes around 15 months. And in the UK, they tend to immunize their children for measles around 15 months. And so they always tend to associate that, and people want, but science has absolutely disproved that.
Dr. Tumuine, always a pleasure to have you, and for some very, very insightful answers, if you ask me. Dr. Daniel Tumuine there joining us to just break down this immunization drive, all the myths and the truth, should I say. He's with the Uganda Pediatric Association, and that, of course, takes us to our poll question for the day. What